did you begin? I want to ask you about that, because 30 is a long time.
Yeah. You know, I always, when people ever ask that question, I always start with where I grew up in my family, because it's so influenced, obviously, where we grew up and how we grew up influences everything about us. And I grew up in Northern California, one of 11 kids, number 9 of 11 kids, 8 girls and 3 boys. And it was chaotic and crazy, and it had also its really great things, because you instantly have your friends with your family. And my mom was very fat phobic, meaning in between all of her pregnancies, she really felt like she had to get herself right back together. And I like to say, indoctrinated into diet culture at the age of 8. And at the age of 8, put on a scale and weighed, as my parents gasped, that I weighed 130 pounds. And in that moment, what I got is, I'm not okay. And so I was indoctrinated into this fat phobic mentality. And I like to say that's the moment I had the spell of unworthiness put on me. Like, there was the spell, unworthy. And that my weight really did reflect my worthiness. And I was weighed and measured and taken to diet doctors and put on Weight Watchers. And
that started at age 8?
That started at age 8. And I always say this one because it just reminds me of how crazy time was then. But my mom took me to this one diet doctor that would inject cow's urine into your bloodstream, because it was said to improve your metabolism. And while they gave her these little black diet pills that eventually I learned to steal from her. And it was, you know, I'm younger, and my older 3 sisters were absolutely beautiful and absolutely thin, and I was 5'10", and trying to squeeze into their tube tops and short shorts and my big feet. And it just was like, so early on, I had the message that I'm not okay. And where that led me was shame, body shame, intense body shame. And I developed an eating disorder. I would hide food, and in between go on these diets that me and all my sisters would go on, and we'd work out in the living room together. But I can so remember that feeling of like, you're just not okay. And my dad would have me do squats while he watched TV, and he would count the squats, right? And so I think about that time, and I think about the idea of course, my parents really meant well. But I love this word, and the way of framing it for myself, and how I frame it now is this intense fat phobia. Like, there couldn't be anything worse in the world than being fat. Like, really, like, disgusting, horrible, awful. There's nothing worse. That was the message that I got. And I got fatter and fatter until I got to well over 200 pounds, 212 pounds, maybe more, but that's the number that I remember. And I really began to self-objectify early on. And looking back, I see how painful that was, right? When I was in it, you're so in it, and you just feel like, this is just me, this is how it is, and I've got to fix myself, I got to fix myself, I got to fix myself. Really intense, especially looking back.
I think it's interesting. We can all probably relate to the seed of that in different ways, and it's pretty wild that, no judgment, but pretty wild that around that age, 7 or 8, is where we get that feeling of ego. We get that feeling of who we are in the world, and what we want to take out into the world, right? We start understanding that we are unique, that we're special, we're different. And there's that place where we can sit just on a precipice and it can go one way or another. And in your case, having that seed of maybe not belonging, having that seed of feeling like shame and the horror of fat and what that actually played out and how it played out. But I think what's interesting about you is how we all have that moment where something awful can happen in your life, something really challenging, whether it's being objectified on the street or being, harassed or being, going through something even more traumatic like rape, whatever that might be on the varying levels of it. What you did, I think, is you turned that into your opportunity.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So let's get into that.
Well, I talk about how there was this moment, right? So I failed at diets. I failed at diets. That was my internal conversation because it was true. I couldn't do it. And when I walked into my first exercise class, I walked into a jazzercise class with my older sister, and it was like a hallelujah moment because my body was strong and I could dance, and I always wanted to be a dancer, but you can't be a fat dancer. And so when I found fitness, it was like, oh my God, and I was good at it, and I was strong, and all those things that I thought were wrong with me now became right with me, and I could choreograph, and classes got packed right away. And the thing that happened, though, in the moment was I started to see my body change, and I then decided I was going to be the warrior of fat, right? I was going to now fight fat because in my mind, fat was so bad. And of course, everybody wants to be thin. And of course, this is the problem, right? It's a problem to be fat, and it's a problem, and nobody wants to be fat, and you shouldn't be fat. And so I wanted to take on, right? I started exercising, my body started to change, I started to feel good, people started to notice me and say, oh my gosh, you've lost weight, you look so good, you look so good, you look so good. And so I started to relate this shift in my body as my recognition and my worth. And so I feel like finding exercise at that time gave me a voice and a way to express myself in a very positive way, but that didn't last very long.
Mm-hmm. So how did you kind of deal with that? Because that is a lot of attention to go from having a sense of, let's call it rejection, or feeling like you're a bit of a fringe dweller, to now feeling like, hey, I'm beautiful, I'm accepted, I'm not sitting on the outside, I'm in the center. So how did you actually deal with that? Because sexuality, intimacy, how you take yourself out for a bit of a dance in the world, all of that gets affected.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think what started to happen was I really felt like my mantra was thin at any price. Thin at any price.
We can all relate to that. Right?
At any price, and I meant it. And I was popular, my classes were packed. This was when Equinox first opened, and Equinox, I was already like national aerobics champion, magazines, blah, 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 like what you would consider top of your field. Mm-hmm. And Equinox opened, and I was at a studio next door, and I didn't want to go because I was loyal to my studio owner, Jeff Martin's studio, but it was done. They were taking over, and they would woo me, and they got me an apartment, and they got me first person to have insurance. I was the highest paid in New York City, top of my field, but inside the feeling of shame was so loud, it makes me cry, because it was the depth of, I was motivated by fear. Fear. Literally, the fear of fat was so intense for me. That's the only reason I was able to lose 70 pounds and keep it off. But I was being bulimic. I was exercising 5 to 6 hours a day. But it was fear, an intense fear of not being enough, not being loved, not being good enough. And here I am, #1, magazine after magazine after magazine, best of New York, best instructor of New York, best workout in New York, highest paid instructor, the only one to get this, national aerobics champion. But the fear it bred in me was so intense. But there was a moment, I got my dream job. It was a TV show, 5 mornings a week, live, this to me was, now I made it. Although my sister said, you're still a fitness instructor. When are you going to do something real with your life?
Sisters are good.
Sisters are good. She was a lawyer, so she highly valued education over. But I got super thin to be hired. And then because my weight did this, because I was using unsustainable means, it would go up 20, 30 pounds. And I got pulled into the office. The executive producer pulled me into the office and had a talk with me about being that talk. And I remember walking down the hallway and I knew it was coming. And my heart just beating. I wanted to die. Literally wanted to die because I knew that conversation was coming. And I left there and I found myself in a taxi. I lived on the Upper West Side. In a taxi going down 9th Avenue. It was a Sunday night and I was all alone. And I'm in a taxi and I'm just like, gone. I'm gone. I'm like this zombie in a taxi. I go to this apartment building on the 16th Street, West Side. And I get out of the taxi, make sure nobody's looking, nobody recognized me. And I walk into this apartment building and I knock on the door and I hand over some money and I get crystal meth. My diet pill. I wasn't a drug addict. I was a shame addict. The spell was so intense. Makes me cry.
The person that we see today.
Yeah, but it was just like, there was that moment when I'm like, this is worth, I'm going to be a drug addict, I'm going to lose my teeth, I'm going to lose my family, I'm going to lose my friends. What the fuck is wrong with this picture? This is fucked up. And I got really mad because I was like, here I am preaching health and diet and exercise, and I'm deceiving myself and I'm deceiving everybody else. And there's this culture of this idealism, of this thin ideal that I've so bought into that I'm so not. And I'm ready to die for this. And then I had a moment of clarity, which was like 1/10 of 1% of people who try to lose weight are able to lose weight and keep it off. 1/10. This industry that I'm in is lying. This is fucked up, and I'm part of this fucked up, and this is stopping here. I'm not the only one failing at this. I'm smart. I'm one of the strongest in the freaking nation, and I'm failing at this. I'm failing at this. This is 24/7 on my mind, and I'm failing at this. Something here is missing. Something here is very, very wrong. And I'm no longer going to be a part of selling this lie to other people. Okay, I've been lying to myself, and they have been being lied to, but no longer will I be a part of this lie that causes people to have body shame, and then trying to sell something that doesn't even solve the problem. So then what happens when I don't work, the diet doesn't work for me? I don't say that diet's wrong. I don't say that conversation's wrong. I say I'm wrong. And my whole life is self-objectification. My whole life I'm saying I'm just a body, and it was just like a moment where I was able to say, this is not right. I am not just a body. I am more than just a body. And I don't know how I'm going to find this answer, but there's a piece missing, and I will devote the rest of my life to changing this conversation and having more here than objectifying people and asking people to objectify themselves. Do you know that when women objectify themselves, they do worse in math and reading comprehension tests? When women are objectifying themselves, seeing themselves from an outsider's point of view, constantly adjusting and worrying what other people are thinking, they can't run as far. They can't hit a ball as far. They can't stay in a state of flow because their mind is halfway there and halfway here. So what we're saying is shrink. You should shrink. You should reduce yourself. You should make yourself tight and small. But it doesn't end tight and small in the body. What do you think it does to your soul? That people say, no, you should shrink, you should be tight, and you should be small, and focus on your body. That is fucked up. Because when we do that, and I know because I did it for so many years, I didn't speak up. I didn't want to be seen. I was scared to death. And I wanted just to find something that would help break people's spell of unworthiness, this trance that we all feed into, that I'm only my weight and how I look and my body. And to shift, I love this idea. There's a group you guys should totally look into. It's called Beauty Redefined, and their mantra is, my body is not an ornament, it's an instrument. This is powerful, because when people work out from this place of body parts, how's your butt, how's your arms, how's your back, so disengaged from the soul, from the being, from the person, especially as women who are so objectified. People who are self-objectifying, they don't stand up. They're not activists. They're not speaking their minds. How many women do you know that are really over worried about their weight and their size and their shape, and so consumed with how many calories they're putting out and if they're gonna age well? This conversation is toxic. It's toxic. And I really like my mission is that we as fitness instructors really see that we do play a part in this, and it's time to stop it. It's time to start speaking a new language. We are part of causing the problem. We can be a part of fixing the problem.
I think it's not just the part of the cultural zeitgeist that you're talking about. This is very much this hypnosis that we've all subscribed to. I mean, Norma Kamali's spoken about it for a long time in the fashion world, and met with stunning silence. And all of a sudden, she's not now, right? So we can push back the walls on this and understand. I think you guys who are here, who are great instrumentalists of change and agents of change when it comes to body, because it's not body, it's mind, it's spirit, and you have the audacity, to say soul. To say soul, because it is about the soul, and fundamentally, we are not parts. We're a beautiful, divine, connected system.
And when we're self-objectifying, we're not connected. We're so far from connected that this is what I like to think about. Like, we've come so far in the fitness industry. There's every kind of workout. It's everywhere. It's really in our culture a very strong, prominent thing. But what I'm saying is, instead of being so focused on the physical development, we've got to be focused on the human development. We've got to really, really understand these are human beings, probably under the trance as well. And we've got to really see that it's time for a human evolution, body diversity. Stop the conversation of the fat body or the thin body or this or that, but the human being, training in the rooms for life, training in the rooms to be good mothers, training in the rooms to be good wives and husbands and good citizens of the world that are ready to stand up and be bold and show up, whatever size, whatever age, whatever race. And they can't do that if they're too worried about the size of their thighs. They cannot do it. It is not possible. It is not possible. And I really believe we've got to really understand our power, because it's strong and it's big, and we've got to make what we do meaningful and understand how meaningful it is. Because when we stand from that place and own it and really self-reflect, how do I feel about my body? How do I stand in this place of self-objectification? Is my mantra thin at any cost? Is that what I'm selling? Am I selling the thin ideal that only 1% of the population could ever even remotely attain? This is what I think we're ready for in the world. This is what I think all of you are representing right now. This is why I'm so passionate about what we're doing with Linked Not Ranked and Zara Terez, because we are the leaders. There are no people in front of us. We're the voices, we're the leaders, we're the ones that are influencing. We have the parents of the next generation in our classes, and you have a mother who's gonna come in and be totally self-absorbed and self-objectifying. She's gonna be the one to put her daughter in Weight Watchers at 8 years old. And it's gonna fuck that kid up for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So we have got to take our role extremely seriously and start doing some real honest self-reflection and seeing where we are and use that as a springboard. It's okay to have these questions and these issues and these hurts, but let's be real and let's be authentic. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this idea of when you self-objectify, what you're taking away from your own mental capabilities.
From your own potential.
Yes.
Right? And it's interesting because I think what you're touching on, and I want to thank you, and I think everybody wants to thank you for being so authentic and so transcendently clear with us and sharing something that's so personal. What you went through that day on 16th and 9th. You know, we've all, I think we're living in a culture, especially as human beings, not our human doingness, but as human beings, we're living in this moment where we've got our little opiate addictions, we're not sleeping well, and we've got issues around sexuality, and we're swiping for sex, and we're doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and we're not being the best that we possibly can be, right? And we have that potential in us. So thank you for that, and thank you, because I think that moment, was it not that moment where you said, what am I doing here? What can I do better? Was that the moment where you thought, intensity, is that where it came through, like an energy flow? Yeah, tell us about that, because you all have that potential to create something that is unique to you and your offering in this new moment.
I think there's one really key point that could go easily overlooked that I really want to highlight. Super, super important is, Stacey kind of spoke to this a little bit earlier, where she said, the first part of my career was very me-focused. I want people to like me. I need to be thin enough so they come to my class. I say I was working for applause. How much can I fill the room? That day that I got pissed off and I thought about how many other people were just like me, struggling, I have them in my family. They're in my family. They're in my class. I know these people. And when I had that moment of, oh my gosh, the compassion, that's what gave me the strength. Because if it was just shame and I should do better, I could have gotten back on the treadmill. I could have really just gotten back on the treadmill and not, but there was so much power in thinking of the others. Because it's very scary to step out and say, but I'm not thin enough. And really keep affirming that and say, but wait a minute, there's a lot of people just like me. And that gave me a real strength, because I was not just finding an answer again for me to lose those 10 pounds. I was finding an answer for everybody else. And I knew that in the industry, this conversation was not happening. And so I wanted to create something that was really gonna help people create lasting change in their lives. And what wasn't being talked about was, if you think about the psychology of change, 20% of it is mechanic and 80% of it is psychology. And our rooms is the 20% most of the time. We need to add the 80%. We need to talk about what are they thinking, how are they dealing with the stress or the fear or the self-objectification. We not separate our bodies and minds just because they come into the classroom. We can start talking to the importance of how we speak to ourselves, how we see ourselves, rewriting the language we use towards ourselves. And Intensati was a way for me to really help people understand that you have to always live true to your self-concept. My self-concept was, I'm fat. And so every time I went into the gym, I am fat, I have to lose weight. I am fat, I'm not good enough, let me go and do this diet again. I am fat. My self-concept, my identity was linked to this being fat. And what I learned through a lot of the research that I did was we have to live true to our self-concept. So every time I lost weight, I would come back like a magnet because I never changed that identity. But I realized that identity can be changed, but we have to do the work to change that identity. We have to become more aware of the conversations that are happening on our mind and understand that, of course, that idea, I am fat, is going to be the reaction. It's going to be the first habit that comes up. But the second thought, where I can say, that's not who I am, or I can say, I'm doing the best I can, or I can say, I'm more than my body. When we learn to interact with those conversations, when we learn to use our words more empoweringly, when we wake up and we say, you know what, today I'm gonna cultivate a new relationship with myself, and if I hear those words of not enough, I can understand that I can actually rewrite those, and it takes practice, and we don't have a physical problem. Like the problems we have in the world with people being overweight and struggling, it's not a physical problem, it's a spiritual problem. It's a spiritual problem. You can't solve a spiritual problem with a physical solution, which is what we're trying to do. This is not, if it was, the diet and exercises would work. We must bring the heart in. We must bring the mind in. If we don't, we're just moving furniture on the Titanic. We're just moving furniture. We can do more, and it doesn't take that much. So Intensati was a way to say, you know what, I can practice rewriting this language, and even though if I say I love and accept myself, people go, oh my God, that's not true, or this is so dumb. That is just evidence that you don't have that thought as your reality. So as you reaffirm and you move it, you're actually taking charge to rewrite your self-concept. You're saying, I have a choice. I can use new language. I can rewrite my destiny. I can activate a state. I can interrupt the state of shame or resentment, and I can make myself strong from the inside out.
Yeah, and you can, it's funny, 600 years ago, 600 BC, Lao Tzu says, watch your thoughts because they become your words, and your words become your action, and your actions become your deed, and they become your destiny, right? So there's so much wisdom in what you're saying here, and it's interesting that you use the word heart. Very interesting to note that the ancient Egyptians, when they emptied out the body cavity after someone had died, the only thing, after they disemboweled the body, took out the brain and everything, the only thing they put back into the body was the heart, because they believed that the heart had divine intuition and an inner guidance system. So when you talk about bringing the heart back into class, it kind of leads me to ask you, and you touched on it, what if given that we are leaders in this room here, as Asia provocateurs, as new designers of what the body can be, the system can be around body, mind, and spirit, and the soul, what is the future of fitness, of this new game? Like how can everybody here leave and be a protagonist and a creator and a co-creator and a co-manifester in something that indecently doesn't exist at the moment?
I think that's a really great question, because I think it's, one, we talked about it a lot earlier, like this, how do we do this authentically, right? How do we do this authentically? I happened to, after that break, I dove fiercely into the study and the research of the mind and mindfulness and the psychology of it, because I wanted to find out, what was I going to do? How was I going to incorporate this? And how was I going to do it in an authentic way? And I'll tell you, I met at first with a lot of resistance. And not surprising. Like, I walked into Equinox.
How was your resistance from yourself?
Well, here's how that played out, which was, I started to understand that unless we changed our mind and our thoughts and our self-concept, the physical body was not going to change. And I really fiercely believed that this was the piece that was missing, right? This piece of not objectifying ourselves and to see our worth as our body, as our weight, but we had to understand that we had a greater power to train our mind, that our mind needed to be an integral part of this training. We needed to change our habits of thinking because our current life is a reflection of our current habits. There's just no way that if we don't change our current habits of thought that we can actually have an outward expression that's sustainable. And I remember I walked into an Equinox class and I was already very popular. I put a new class on the schedule and the class was packed right away. And we would do the workout and nobody would do the affirmations, and then they would do it and then nobody would do the affirmations. And then one of my managers came up to me and she says, why don't you just talk less? Like, talk less at the beginning, save the talk for the end. Because actually someone wrote in a message on a piece of paper that said she talks too much, right? Right before I went to teach class, by the way. I was like, I turned into a huge, warrior. And I had a piece of paper in my hand and I said, I have some feedback that somebody's written. I'd like to touch on that. So I got some feedback that people in here might think that I talk too much. First of all, I'd like to tell you there's 100 other classes on the schedule that you're very welcome to take. And in fact, I teach some of those classes. And if this class isn't for you, I totally understand. We can even still be friends, no hard feelings. But the reason I'm doing this class, and I just went there and laid it on the line, and I just said, I had an eating disorder for this many years. I have been struggling for years and years, and I know that unless we change the way we think, we cannot change our lives. And I'm teaching something new, and that's what this class is about. And we speak affirmations. We're going to do a call and response. And if that doesn't vibe with you, you can leave. Anybody want to leave? But that was a moment, right? That moment, and everybody was like, I'm not leaving. That wasn't me. I didn't write that thing. But they tried it that day. I didn't even think you were in that class, Natalia, because I remember Natalia was definitely one of the first, on board. But people, did the affirmations, even though there was a part of them that resisted, and tears rolled down their face. Because for a moment, what happened was they stopped. Even if you say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, what's happening is you're not saying what you're used to saying. And it becomes a guardian angel of your mind. And as you do it, even when you don't believe it, what you're doing is you're sowing the seeds. You're sowing the seeds of something new. You're putting in your mind options that maybe you didn't think were options because you thought something outside had to change first. And I understand if this doesn't feel comfortable, but let that be a message, because then that says that what is comfortable is the negative self-talk. That's what it says to me. And why are you okay with criticizing yourself and looking at yourself and picking yourself apart and then expecting to have a great life? We pick ourselves apart and expect, oh, now I'm going to have a great day. It doesn't work that way. So if you want to sow the seeds of a future that's unlike your present, you have to start with the conversations that are in your own mind, and you have to start sowing the seeds that maybe it doesn't feel good to say, I love myself, or I'm born to thrive, I am fully alive, the good in me is all I see. But I see the words that you've said before have caused the spell of unworthiness. These are the words that break the spell of unworthiness. Now, if you want to break that spell of unworthiness, you've got to use the very thing that caused the spell as the antidote. So now we're going to use the words as the antidote, as the mind medicine, because there is nothing wrong with you, and you've got to step up and you've got to retrain yourself to break that spell, because it is not true. And it started to move from there. It's scary, right? It's scary. It's uncomfortable for people to say these things. It makes them feel vulnerable. It says, this is so dumb. But just think about what you're saying when you say that. You're saying, no, I'd rather keep the old self-criticism going because I'm comfortable with that.
Well, we're used to that because we know that. We know that conversation, but you're talking about changing the innate vernacular, because it's in that changing of the vernacular that we actually start creating a whole new energy system in the body where you're like, I'm changing my mind, I'm changing my body, I'm changing my spirit, not because I'm
human being, human being. As a human being, like, and I think the original question was what can you guys do? And there's so much, and I know you all have your own way, but start researching areas that are meaningful for you. And one of the things that I would love to challenge you is, can you cut the fat talk? Can you what is fat talk? Fat talk is, oh, you lost weight, you look so good. Oh my gosh, you're looking better. Oh no, I've gained weight, my thighs are bigger. Does my butt look big in this? Which is what we do, is so natural. It's so natural. This is the place that people feel like, oh, let me be able to talk about that. But can you imagine if you said, listen, this week, we're going fat talk free. We're not going to talk about your body. We're not going to talk about your weight. We're going to talk about how can this workout have you feel sane. So when you go home, I have 3 little kids. I know how hard it is to keep your cool when you're a mom. I know it is hard. And I need the workout so that I can be grounded. How about talking about, let's do this workout so you can be grounded when you go home. Let's do this workout so that you can deal with the difficulties in life, because your mind isn't going to be just objectifying your body, but you're strengthening all of you as a human being so that you can walk out into the world and be who you want to be. That's just one simple way. Or just talk about, you could even say, what are you thinking right now? Is that thought that you're thinking helping you or hurting you? Do you know that you could change that? You don't even have to give them more. You could give them one mantra. You could have them start with an intention that's not about weight loss. You could say, let's think bigger than seeing ourselves as our bodies. Let's train, because putting this effort into health is really something that will help increase our quality of life, but also to understand that something else I think that we've really ingrained and been ingrained in us is weight is not a measure of health. I was my thinnest when I was doing lines of crystal meth. Thin does not mean you're healthy. And you can be healthy and you can be a bigger size. This is really important that we actually speak to that actually health is a function of how often, how consistent are you working out. It's also a function of your quality of life, but it's also a function of how you're using your mind. And we've got to look at all those 3 areas. If our purpose here is really that our goal is to help people become healthy, we as professionals have to really raise our bar and understand. For me, the dream would be stop the weight talk. Stop it. Just stop it. It's body shaming. It helps people self-objectify. And just think about where you do it yourself, and then be honest. Be honest. Bring that. Like, you don't have to go deep into anything, but I'll show up and be like, fuck, I so feel like I went on, we went to Brazil. My wife is Brazilian, and we went on this trip. And there's something about going there that always triggers me. And I was there, and the thoughts of like, I can cry just thinking of it, because it was like, the beast awake, like horrifying, and I couldn't break it. And it was a moment of like, really? Really? I literally was like, I just want to die. That was so painful. And I thought, and I had just said, what if my daughter was saying this to herself? And thank God I've done this work for so long that I could hear the thought and feel the thought, but I could also reject the thought and say, this is conditioning. I deserve to be here. I'm not going to let these thoughts make me shrink, not make me speak, not make me go out in the world. These are the very thoughts that are conditioned into our society. I am speaking back to this. And the spell was broken, but there was pain in the old conditioning that's still there. I want my daughters to go into your classes and not be objectified. I want my daughters to go into your classes and be uplifted and be treated as more than their body parts, so that when they go out into the world, they can speak up, they can be seen, they can show up. I want the world to change. And we are so powerful. There's force in numbers. We're here together. We all feel this. I know we do. I want us to join, and I want us to just, for me, it's like, I don't have the answers. I don't know what you should do. For me, the only idea here is, can I plant this seed? Can you have some honest self-reflection? Can you start thinking about if you think about just yourself, you think everybody's just like you. And if you speak to what you need, and if you speak to what hurts you, and if you speak to what's hard with you, it takes a lot of courage, man. It takes a lot of courage. It takes bravery to actually have these new conversations. So I really encourage you to also just remember that when you do it, it's so fucking strengthening and empowering for you, because whatever spell you're under, whatever conditioning you're feeling oppressed by, which it has to be, you can actually help someone in that same area just by being genuine and honest.
Wow. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Woo!